I am Anna Seawold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, how to influence your child. The truth is, raising happy and successful kids in the age of anxiety and distraction is hard. When we realize that our job as parents is to do our best, given the resources, to help our kids become the best version of themselves rather than another version of ourselves, it shifts the burden of ownership from us to them. I have said this many times. When we control our children, we lose our influence. It could be challenging to be an authoritative parent, not authoritarian, warm, loving, engaged, and consistently enforcing clear limits. But it's worth the practice. Today, we're going to explore this theme on the podcast. Watching our children develop into their own people can be equally joyful and daunting. We need to release ourselves from the idea that our success can be measured through the success of our children. Trying to control is futile and counterproductive. How can we give freedom within limits? How to set limits without being dictatorial. How to let go of control and increase autonomy so that kids will become more self-disciplined and motivated, learn to make their own decisions, make mistakes, and grow. My special guest today is Dr. Christine Carter. She's an author, sought-after speaker, and coach. Her books include The New Adolescence, Raising Happy and Successful Teens in an Age of Anxiety and Distraction, The Sweet Spot, How to Achieve More by Doing Less, and Raising Happiness, 10 Simple Steps to More Joyful Kids and Happier Parents. Dr. Carter writes a monthly advice column for Greater Good magazine, where she draws on scientific research to help people lead their most courageous, joyful, meaningful, and productive lives. She's a contributor to U.S. News and World Report, and her advice column is syndicated on psychologytoday.com and several other websites. Dr. Carter has appeared on The Oprah Show, The Dr. Oz, The Today Show, The Rachel Ray Show, and many others. And she's been quoted and featured in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Boston Globe, the Chicago Tribune, and elsewhere. She lives with her husband and 4 teenagers in California. This conversation is geared towards parents of preteens and teens. However, if you're a parent of young children, you can absolutely find great value in it. Speaking of parents of young children, I'll be teaching a live online class just for you on Wednesday, May 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's called The Why of Challenging Behaviors and the How-Tos of Handling Them. Tickets are now on sale. They are $39, and you can get yours now by visiting authenticparenting.com/class. That's authenticparenting.com/class. I taught this class on March 31st, and I'll be teaching again in the future. This is the perfect class if you're frustrated with your child's quote-unquote bad behavior and you're dealing with a lot of acting out, outbursts, screaming, yelling, not listening, tantrums. This is a perfect class for someone who wants to parent with less control, more compassion and respect, but still maintain their authority as a parent and not become a doormat and allow kids to get away with things. As well as if you and your partner have different views and approach to discipline, then this just might be the class to get you on the same page. All you need is science-based understanding of hidden factors and root causes of misbehavior presented in an accessible way and sprinkled with humor and straight talk. Sign up today, get your ticket, and I'll see you on May 5th. authenticparenting.com/class. And now, please enjoy this lively, practical, and thought-provoking conversation with Christine Carter. Christine, welcome to Authentic Parenting.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Yes, me too. I love your book. I have it here on my table. The New Adolescence, Raising Happy and Successful Teens in an Age of Anxiety and Distraction. And I love it for several reasons. One of them is it's very practical and there are lots of good strategies. And I want to ask you today to share some of them here with us. So you're raising for teenagers, for adolescents, I should say, right?
Yes. Yeah. An important distinction because now they're actually out the other end of the adolescent spectrum. My two oldest are 20 and 21. So, they don't like to be called teenagers anymore, but they're very much adolescents still. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good place to start because the terms teenagers, adolescents, people may get confused. So why don't you tell us then how long does the adolescence last? Where does it begin? Where does it end? What are we talking about?
Yeah.
Right?
So it's a long decade, the longest decade ever. So from adolescence, from a brain standpoint, like when we're thinking about the really massive changes that happen during adolescence in the brain, that begins about 3 years before the physical signs of puberty begin. So that could, that's very early in some girls, 8 or 9 years old even. And it ends when the brain changes stop, which is mid 20s for most kids. There are things that can end adolescence earlier, right? But for the most part, kids today, we're still seeing the kinds of massive brain changes into their 20s. Some boys, 26 or 27, right?
Yes. What I love about this book is that you actually talk about, most people actually dread having teenagers, talk about teenagers. Oh, you have teenagers, welcome to teenage, right? It's like there's this notion that teenagers is the worst. But I'm wondering, and you portrayed in a very good light for the parent and for the teens, you give a positive. You describe it positively, like for a parent of a teen, it's a good experience, joyful it can be. And you do also view your teenagers under the same beautiful light. Here is what I've noticed. I've worked internationally. And what I've noticed here in the United States, and I'm wondering if you see the same trend, is when our children are young, like 3 and up a little bit, right? When they're in their preschool years, let's say, sort of we give them a lot of choices, a lot of freedom, a lot of autonomy. And when they get into teenage years, parents start to rein the kids more. They exert a lot of control, which I think it should be the opposite, right? We should be, right? So I'm wondering if you can speak about this a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's really domain sensitive, meaning like in certain areas, we're very controlling as American parents, and in other areas we're incredibly permissive. And the permissiveness comes around things that we feel like we can't control, even if we tried, like technology use and everything. But I think as our society has become much more focused on pleasure and happiness. We've become more permissive with our littler kids. And at the same time, we've stayed and increased our focus, I think, on achievement and success. And that makes us more controlling when they're teenagers, right? This is exactly the opposite of the way we want things to be, right? We always want to give our kids structure. So long as we're parenting them as our children, we want to provide some sort of structure, boundaries that they need to learn to manage themselves within. So when they're littler, those boundaries are tighter, right? Like we can think of it as scaffolding that we start to remove as they start to demonstrate mastery in these areas of their lives. So, we don't really need to, I don't need to support my children in doing their laundry at all anymore. But, when they were little and first learning how to do it, there were certain things. There was like laundry day, right? And I provided a whole structure for them moving the laundry through and somehow ending up back in their drawers. Right. So, that's not a very good example, but in terms of what we're really seeing in terms of achievement. But, I think we're so afraid of our kids not doing well and the stakes seem higher when they're teenagers that we just step in and do stuff for them that they really should be doing themselves. They would really do well to learn to do themselves.
Yeah. And you reference in your book two of my favorite authors who have been on the podcast before, Dr. William Stixrud, who's co-authored The Self-Driven Child, an amazing book, right? And
Yes.
Dr. Dan Siegel. In The Self-Driven Child, he also talks about control, autonomy, which you talk in depth in your book, right? How we can move from control-based parenting into giving our children more autonomy,
Right.
decision-making opportunities, so that they will become more self-driven, self-sufficient. Right?
Yeah, I love those authors very much, and I've drawn on their work a lot. And I'm also, I've spoken about this with them directly. Like I'm a little bit more like it's not all entirely up to our kids, right? Like we want them ultimately to be self-driven, but we also really need to provide them with good, clear boundaries that they can be self-driven within. So with kids, we're not like, okay, go north, right? Like we're like, no, drive on this road or this road or this road. All of those are fine. They'll get you to where we've agreed you're going. Right. So we do want to provide them with lots of choices. And I do think we're totally aware of that. Like with our toddlers, we're like, all right, we're going to give you some limited choices here so that you feel like you're in control. And we're doing that still when they're teenagers, except for that it's like the choices are lots. There are lots and lots and lots of choices that they can make, but within really clear expectations, really clear boundaries.
Yeah, I think when they are toddlers or preschoolers, a lot of us every person develops their own sort of parenting style, parenting technique. We sharpen, fine tune. And unfortunately, what I see when working with parents is they continue with the same repertoire, with the same strategies into teenage years. Whereas I think we need to update as our children grow older, right?
Yes, very much. And I think that a lot of parents, a lot of us are really comfortable with the way we've been doing things, right? And so for me, I'm a professional advice giver. I am very comfortable telling people what to do. And this is crazy making for teenagers, right? I don't think that my kids particularly loved it when they were little, but it becomes like a developmental imperative during adolescence to individuate, right? So as, if I was telling my kids what to do when they were little, it was probably annoying, right? And, to them, but it didn't it didn't trigger them basically, right? It didn't make them want to do exactly the opposite. And it didn't inhibit them from learning how to make informed decisions, how to decide what it is that they want, right? It didn't help them learn how to repair their mistakes.
Because
right?
I think the biological imperative, I just want to interject, at that time was not, the emphasis was not on the individuation, right?
Right. Right.
Maybe that's why they didn't pay attention and they were not so triggered or maybe annoyed. But I think in teenagers, it's like, just leave me alone, right? This is biologically imperative.
Yes, yes. Lots of things are happening in the teenage brain, which means that they do have this imperative to individuate from us, right? And so that's why when we have these really outstanding ideas for them and their lives, they reject them because they need to choose something that is different than what we've actually chosen for them, so to speak. This is where that autonomy or referencing really comes in, right? Their self-motivation or motivation in the world depends on this core psychological need of autonomy, feeling independent. They also need to feel competent and they need to feel in connection with us. Those three things are really important for their motivation in the world. And if any one of them is thwarted, their motivation will start to suffer. So there's just booby traps all along for us, right? As parents who like to just tell our kids what to do, because telling them what to do can make them feel like they're lacking in autonomy or independence. It can make them feel incompetent, like we don't believe in them, that they can just work it out themselves. And it can make them push us away, which ruptures our connection with them. So the most important thing I think that we can do with our teenagers is really, really practice not using non-controlling language, not telling them directly what to do, not doing things for them that they need to learn to do themselves, right? Even though we're so much more efficient and we can do it so much faster, even if it's seemingly kind of unimportant, like they need to make their own dental appointments. And it seems like it would just be so much easier because I'm going to be driving you and I need to do blah, 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 blah. Like I'll just do it fast myself, right? But no, they need to learn to do these things themselves and to, to work it out.
What would be a good way for the parent to shift their lens, sort of keep the eye on the bigger picture when they slip into those control techniques? Because it's a lot efficient and faster for us. We know what's right and we can get it done. But like, I always remind myself, like, she's learning important skills. My daughter is almost 13. So this is not about like my momentary convenience, right? For me to get satisfaction in this moment. But what am I teaching her, long term? What is she learning from this experience? I think it's always good to keep our gaze at the larger picture of life, right?
Yeah. And even if we can't really find the big life skill in it, remembering like, is this fostering independence? Is it fostering a sense of competence that they can move through life without, and I think that the even though it's comfortable to just be directive for most of us, because we're used to that to just really practice asking questions. So my favorite question ever is, what's your plan? Right?
I used it today. I just want to say it was amazing. I was referencing the book for the interview and I said, let me use this like today, like before this interview. And it's so phenomenal. The depth it can go to, like that conversation you can have with your kid, the turn it will take, the very issue that you're struggling with. So please tell me more about this.
Yeah, well, I want to hear how it went for you today, but this is like my kids tease me that they're going to have a t-shirt made that says, what's your plan on it? Because it is like the thing that I go to when I want to tell them what to do, right? So what's your plan for getting some exercise today? What's your plan for moving your dirty dishes down to the kitchen? What, what I mean? Like it's big things and small things, right? It's, what's your plan for this summer, right? Like that's a big thing, right? But usually I just use it if, what's your plan for getting your teeth cleaned again in 6 months, right? Like not, you need to make a follow-up appointment, but what's your plan for so most adolescents, the executive function that enables them to plan is a developing skill. And so most of them don't have a plan, not because they're, lazy or not forward thinking, but because, it is kind of good that they don't tend to be very forward thinking. They're not practiced at thinking about planning all the time because they haven't needed to. And also because the part of their brain that thinks about the future is just coming online. And I think that these kids it's going to be really interesting having been in a pandemic for a year, right? Where it sort of behooves them not to think about the future, right? Like, I think that we're going to have to be pretty deliberate about bringing their planning facility sort of back online, because it's just been really hard for them. Every plan they made has blown up in the last year. And a year during adolescence it's much bigger to them developmentally than it is to a year for us adults, right? For us, it's not,
I really want to emphasize what you're saying, because I just had that conversation this morning with my daughter about going back to school next year. This year it's all virtual. And I am trying to actually talk more about what the future may look like. How is she going to go back, attend school, participate in sports? I want her to be hopeful also, right? I want to instill that life is gonna change and there is hope, and also for her to look forward to, not to lose that sense of positivity and hope, but also for the very reason that, like, the skills that she didn't practice now, I want her to know that, it's good to be on top of her things, because she's going to be relying on those skills, when the school year begins. It's an important thing. I think we all need to talk to our kids instead of just, I don't know, getting lost in the blur's day of every day, right? I mean, we need to talk about the future and instill hope. In my community, actually, last week, a high school student committed suicide because of the isolation, the pandemic, and it's a very high performing, high achieving school district. And it was very, very devastating for me to read that email as a parent. And just, it shook me to the core, that we need to, because I felt like in October, I hit a very low point, what I thought it was my lowest point of the pandemic. But then I realized that, no, wait, February was my lowest point, when I felt mentally exhausted and like I couldn't see any hope or anything. And as a mental health professional, if I'm feeling like this, how are other people doing? And so I think one of the things is to look for that future, to have hope and new meaning that things are going to be better, instead of just living in this whatever days and just, right? I think it's important.
I think it's important too. And I think that this is another area where we can ask our kids questions. So right now, I wouldn't be so focused on the skills that they're going to need for back to school. I think we should expect a pretty rough start for most kids, right? Like, we're just going to let them begin where they are and know that they can learn so rapidly as teenagers or as adolescents. Like, we learn and adapt really quickly, and they will build those skills when they're able to practice them and when the practice feels meaningful. For right now, I think it's really important to be talking to them about their feelings, right? And not so much why they're feeling what they're feeling, but what they're feeling in all of this. Mm-hmm. So for your daughter, I would, if she knows about the suicide, right, that's going to bring up a lot of really big feelings. And
no, she doesn't actually, which because it was a high school student, so she doesn't know, which is great. But a lot of other students know, right, in the district.
Right. And so it's sort of, as parents, it's really important for us to not to try and fix those feelings, right? It's appropriate for them to feel like profound grief in the face of this, and for it to bring up a lot of other things, and to just ask them about that and empathize, validate what it is that they're feeling, and really ask them to to be present to what they're feeling. Where in their body do they feel it? Right? Like, so that, because these kids are really numbing, and that emotion suppression causes a lot of problems, right? They distract themselves from how they're feeling with their screens. And so we want to sort of bring them back to what they're actually feeling, so that, come next fall, they can start recovering from all this. I think part of what we can help them feel, like, where once we've heard how they're actually feeling, what you bring up is really important. The sort of sense of hope, positive emotions about the future are things that we can feel and that we can cultivate in ourselves. And it doesn't really work for an adolescent, for a parent to be like, let's talk about what you're hoping for, or what you feel hopeful about, right? Because they'll be like, nothing that you suggest, Mom, right? But not always, but to just say, like, positive emotions about the future are really important. What are you looking forward to, right? Asking questions. You can leave out the positive emotions about the future are important, because that's like a signal that you care and want them to feel a certain way. And so you don't really want to say that was for us as parents, but to say, like, what are you looking forward to? What do you have on the calendar that you're anticipating, right? They need to have something to look forward to. And, like, what are you hoping for is a perfectly reasonable question to get them thinking about the future in a positive light.
Yeah, or it could be family vacations or sporting
Yeah.
activities, the things that they have missed, like birthday parties, whose birthday party, or your birthday party. How do you want to celebrate your birthday party? It could be so many aspects that we can ask that question in different ways. I like, what's your plan? And if it becomes annoying, maybe we can switch the word plan and ask the same question in a different way. Like, what are you thinking about this? What are you going to do about this? I don't know. Will that work, or that's too intrusive?
I think it probably would work. I have stuck with, what's your plan? I also use the self-driven child suggests it's your call, and so it's a similar sort of non-controlling way of saying it. We will often say, I've modified, like, it's your call. And then, there's like what comes afterwards. So I've modified, which is all the things you want them to consider, right? So I will say, hey, it's your call. You get to decide. It's your decision. I'd like it to be an informed decision. I need you to show me it's an informed decision. Here's the information I'd like you to take into consideration, right? So I've worked with their existing motivation for autonomy and to, like, be able to own the decision, right? That's their motivation. And to get them to sort of consider my motivation, right? Like the things that I care about. It works really well.
It does. And also, because it's non-controlling, right? For once, you're giving them autonomy over their life. It's not very obvious that, hey, you're saying, what's your plan? What you're going to do about this? And they're starting, if they haven't thought about it, they will start to think about it now.
Yeah.
Because they assume responsibility.
Right. And sometimes they won't. They'll be like, you decide. Right.
Or sometimes they will say, I don't know, I don't care.
Yeah. And then I say, why don't you care? Okay. And then you go back to, like, what is, like, do you need them to care? What is their existing motivation in the whole thing? Like, how can you sort of draw on that in it? Or is it something that you could let go of? Right. But if it's something that's really important, and a kid says, I don't know, you decide, don't take the bait, right? Like, on that, because it backfires in a lot of ways. We need them to be making their own decisions about things. And sometimes a kid who hasn't made a plan just hasn't thought about it enough. And it's important for them to think about it. You might think that you've just been offered a free pass to get them to do what it is that you want them to do, but that tends to backfire, right? So you can say, oh no, it's your call. Here's some things I would consider if I were you. But really, I'm going to need to know, what your plan is. How much time do you need to come up with a plan? When do you want to talk about this again? Still giving them these big open-ended, things like, do you want to talk about this at dinner tonight? Or do you want to just get it out of the way in the next half hour or so?
Yeah, I like that, because then the child, I think even if the child lays out the plan, but doesn't follow through for whatever reason, because we're human, they don't have all the skills, I think it's still a win. I don't want the parent to go and switch their techniques into more controlling techniques, just because the child failed or it was a mistake. You know what I mean? Because I want the parent to be consistent with this kind of approach. As a consultant, as a coach, as a guide, as opposed to trying once, it didn't work. Oh, it doesn't work. Then I'm going to resort to my old techniques, as opposed to seeing again the larger picture. At least my child thought about it, laid out the plan, but she wasn't able to fully implement the plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
In my book, it's still a win, right? When the child...
Yes. And they still need support. They just because they don't do things perfectly doesn't mean that you get to take over, or that it's a failure, or it would be a good idea to. So the reason that we ask about their plan is so that we can support them along the way. So what's your plan for making a follow-up dentist appointment? Oh, I didn't do that. Okay, well, what's your plan for making a follow-up dentist appointment? I'm going to do it. I'm going to call them next week, or I'm going to see if there's something on. And so then you make a little note. When I didn't see the dentist appointment on the family calendar, when did you make it for? I want to make sure I can drive you. Right.
Or do you need me to drive? Do you need do you need to coordinate with my schedule if I have to drive? Right.
I need to make sure that, and they'll be like, oh, it's in 6 months. Oh, okay. Well, the dentist fills up because everybody's making their thing in 6 months. So now what's your plan? You just keep asking it in 1,000 different ways.
Yeah. I asked my daughter today, she has an assignment due, what's your plan? She answered, and then I said, so when you're going to do you have all the things necessary? What is it that you think you need? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? Like, she laid out the whole thing, right? I'm not positive if she's going to do it, but I will still be there because I know her plan. I can remind her or ask her in a gentle way, not in a controlling way. I just want to mention that we're not like hands-off parents. What's your plan?
No.
It's your call. Then go do your life.
No,
right?
Not at all. Not at all. Like, this is not a disengagement. In fact, it requires, I think, a higher level of engagement with what's going on with your kid. It's easier to just do, it's easier to nag, for example, but that doesn't create connection, and connection is engagement, right? So I actually wouldn't remind her of any of the things that she's, no, because that is not, it falls into the nagging thing. Ask how it went, even if you know that it didn't go, right? You can ask how you can support her. You could say, oh, I know that you were going to do the initial research. Do you need anything? Is there anything I can do to support you? I'm so interested in what you learned. And then if she says, oh, I actually didn't do it because basically you can help her look for the unanticipated obstacle. She didn't realize that she was going to be walking the neighbor's dog. And so then, you know what I mean? Like, so then you can help them make either more specific plans, right? If they invite you to, but you can, through your questioning, engage them in making really specific plans, like on Tuesday at 3 p.m., right? So that's the first skill. On Tuesday at 3 p.m., I will sit down at the desk that's in the hallway and open the book that I got from, really, really specific steps dramatically increases the odds that they'll do it. They need to go from this sort of abstract vision of the plan of what they're trying to do to the concrete specifics of what that looks like. It's a real skill. Even most adults I work with need this skill better.
Because their parents used control techniques when they were kids, right? They failed to develop those very important skills. And I meet so many adults who are not so punctual. They're not good at planning, executive functioning skills, they're like disorganized and all of that. But I mean, the roots are in our, in the childhood, in the teenage years, when your parent makes all the decisions for you, from what you're going to eat, how you're going to do, what you're going to wear, from everything. Then, I mean, then you don't rely on yourself to make any decision, right?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I think the other thing that we can really help them with is to anticipate obstacles. This is something that adults have a hard time with too. It's like we make plans, but if we don't anticipate the obstacles and make plans for when we encounter the obstacles, like that's just as important as having a vision or having a good plan for what we want. And so we can approach that with like, oh, of course you didn't do it because we forgot to anticipate the obstacles. Well, now you know that walking the neighbor's dog is going to be a bit of an obstacle, or things that you don't have on your calendar are an obstacle, or whatever, or your little brother's drum practice is going to be an obstacle, like whatever they are, they might seem like ridiculous or super predictable or small. But if we don't make specific plans for when we encounter those obstacles, our original plan will almost always be derailed. 3/4 of the time, an unanticipated obstacle or unplanned for obstacle.
Yeah, I love that. But that's a skill in and of itself, right? To have that foresight, to even predict the obstacles, what might get in the way, or do a post analysis, what didn't work, how would you do it next time? I think it's important. These are all good, valuable skills.
Absolutely. There is this whole really interesting body of research. It's on adults, but it totally applies to teenagers, and especially to college. It's real, like a lot of this research is actually on college students. So we could say it's on adolescents in some ways, that if you spend a lot of time visualizing what it is you want and making plans, and this is for things like your daughter's school project or bigger things that tend to be important to them, your brain sort of checks it off as done, right? It feels like you kind of accomplished it. And so you'll have a harder time mustering the energy or the resources towards getting started. It creates more trouble with task initiation when you actually go to do it, unless you anticipate the internal obstacle, the ways that we sabotage ourselves. So teenagers have no idea. They don't have the life experience to know how they sabotage themselves. Only people who've had a lot of therapy know how they do that, right? But we can, for the most part, anticipate the things of, being too tired, right? Not feeling like it. This is a big one in my family, like with the kids. They're like, I'm like, and so what will be the obstacle? Well, it'll be the time to do it and I won't feel like it. Okay, well, that's predictable. What will you do if you don't feel like it? Right? Yeah. Okay, well, I'll just work on it for 10 minutes. And then if I still don't feel like finishing after that, I'll just let myself do something fun.
Yeah, I learned something from Dan Pink. I'm not sure, was it in his book or in one of his talks? He said he said a strategy that I use, not frequently, because just like with any strategy, you don't want to overuse them, right? Your kids learn quickly and it loses its power. But this is a good strategy that I implement, and maybe you know of this too. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you to tackle X, let's say whatever thing that she has to do or promised to do. And usually at first the child says 3, like very low number, right? And again, this goes to the honoring the autonomy, because you're not saying you got to do it now and it's better be done now my way or the highway. It's like you're not saying you're off the hook, you still have to do it, but we're giving you autonomy, and we're honoring when you're going to do it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you to tackle X? And the child says 3. You're like, oh, okay. So what will get you to number 8, not 10, because we're not perfectionistic, 8. The child is thinking, right? if I have some snack or if I do X or if I, whatever, they will come up with something, then I'll be 8. Okay, deal. Do we have a plan? Yes. It's like I've used that with my kid.
Oh,
And
that is genius. I
right?
love that.
Yeah.
I'm totally gonna use that. That's a
Okay.
good one.
That's a good one. So let's talk about some of your strategies that you talk about in the book. What are some of your go-tos that you use with your kids, your favorites, that you most frequently advise to other parents, that you got like great feedback on?
Yeah, well, we have already covered the number one, which is,
Yes.
what is your plan? Actually, that's the number one kind of like analytical side of my brain. The number one emotional, like that's the mind. My heart is to just say, to observe them. When kids are struggling, this is like I always have 1,000 fantastic solutions to all of their problems, right? Like I have to stop myself from offering them, and because that's not helpful and it's really invalidating, and it will backfire anyway. They won't do what I suggest. So I like first thing that comes out of my mouth, and I really overuse these, and so far I've never been called on this one. I say, that sounds hard. That's really hard. That's super hard, right? Like I just observe, right? So I think whenever we've got a kid who's disappointed or experiencing difficulty or grappling with the uncertainty of the world that we're living in, or is stressed and complaining of stress, I think the first thing to do is to acknowledge how they're feeling, like see them, right? Not try and explain why they're feeling the way that they're feeling, not trying to fix what it is, not trying to over relate to it by talking about how we feel that way too.
Oh my
None
gosh,
of those things.
that's my least favorite strategy that people use. It's like, come on, it was about me, it wasn't about you.
Right.
Right?
To just see them and show them that we see them. We're listening. We're trying to get it. I don't always get it right. But like once you say that's hard, you could say, I understand why you're sad. I understand why you're frustrated. It makes sense to me that you are. And then like just letting it hang, right? Like they will wait for you to rush in and try and make it better. And so just saying, I get it. I totally get it. If I were you, I'd be sad too.
I know. I remember when virtual learning began and everything, my daughter was obviously not happy. I remember I said that. I said, whoa, this remote learning sucks. And she's like, yay, you're telling me? And so that was this opportunity for her just to express how she felt,
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that I do sometimes, if I have my partner, my husband, or my best friend, we sort of quarantine together. She comes over for coffee. We chat, and my daughter is doing remote learning there. Like she can listen. I say not reassuring things, more validating things to my friend, and my daughter overhears how empathetic I am to my kid's experience.
Yeah.
Like she's not directly
That's
listening,
great.
but I know she does, right?
Right.
And then like I can see that changes the flavor of the connection throughout the day. That wow, my mom gets me. Like she complains about my experience to a neighbor. You know what I mean?
Right. Absolutely. And I think that's a brilliant tactic for an adolescent, right? They are always watching us. They're watching us for hypocrisy. They're watching us for validation. They're watching us for all kinds of things, unconsciously noting what it is we are and aren't doing, whether or not we're walking the talk. So to draw on that, so always modeling what we want them to learn. And also we can count on the fact that they're eavesdropping.
Yes. Very natural human tendency. So the adolescents are very, like the early teenagers at least, very are hormonal and emotional, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of parents have a hard time with that. I want you to say a few comforting words to those parents that, is this a phase? Is everything all right with my kid? They're very moody, they shift. It's one moment it's a sunshine California day, another time it's like a tornado, right?
Yes, it's super normal. It's thought to be a evolutionary thing where they're just learning to experience their emotions as really big because that it's a better way to learn how to regulate, right? So the roller coaster is completely normal. If they seem really down, it's okay. We don't need to worry too much. It's only I only want parents to worry when it's not a roller coaster, right? Where they're not showing you that they're down sometimes, or they're not ever up, right? They're just down, down, down. But it's normal for them to experience their emotions in a really amplified way. And it can be delightful as well. I just like parents to keep that in mind, right? Like when they experience joy, they experience it in such a big way. And we as parents aren't always privy to that because they tend to reserve it for their friends, right? But if we can trust that that's, what's happening, that they, are experiencing elation and awe and the positive emotions on a scale that they've never experienced it before and probably won't again until they have kids of their own, right? Like the big love and the big happinesses really come in adolescence. That's why we remember our adolescence so well.
Yeah, definitely. We do and it's kind of scary what they may remember. So we have to be careful what we say, how we say, because I remember certain things like teachers or adults have said to me in those teenage years, good positive and negative things that it just stays for the rest of your life with you. It can become part of your identity even. Either it's a positive thing or negative thing. I think the way we speak to our kids is so crucial. The language, the tone.
I don't totally agree with that. I just think that puts unnecessary pressure on parents, right? Like we make a lot of mistakes as parents. And the most important thing is that we repair those mistakes. If we say something that is clearly like potentially scarring and we realize it, then we go back and we repair it. We say, you know what, I was wrong in saying that. And that's not the way I see you. And I wouldn't want you to see yourself that way or whatever. I think learning to repair a mistake is a really important skill. And our kids will learn it from us when we repair the mistakes that we make with them. Like, I don't think that so long as we're open to the fact that we make mistakes as parents and we're open to repairing them, nothing will scar them forever.
Oh, good. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful then. Well, Christine, if you were to go back in time, knowing what you know about parenting, adolescence, and happiness, all the work that you've done, what would you say to yourself as a new mom?
It's going to be so fun when they're teenagers because it's fun to watch them really come into focus as the people that they are. And even though their emotions will be big and you'll want to control everything and you'll have to step back, you'll grow as a parent just as much as you've grown with this little infant.
Thank you so much. This was such a fun, joyful, and the time flew by very quickly interview. I'm very delighted that you were able to join me. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me. It's fun to be here.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it. What's your biggest takeaway from this episode? Did you find it helpful? How you may apply what you gleaned from this episode into your own life. I absolutely love Christine's "What's your plan?" strategy, and I have to say I've been using it in my parenting. Get in touch. Send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. Call the number 732-763-2576 and leave a voicemail. And for you, my international listeners, go to authenticparenting.com/contact and use the free SpeakPipe tool to leave an audio message. grab your ticket today to my live online class on May 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Tickets are on sale. It's only $39. Go to authenticparenting.com/class, and I can't wait to see you there. Until next week, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.